Hello everyone and welcome. So, history and fiction and layer after layer after layer after layer of exciting but not always accurate storytelling. Such is the world of interpretation. I thought we should have a look at some of those examples where fiction and historical facts become so intertwined and linked that it can sometimes be difficult to see what is what. And it's something that you very often come across when working in especially historical places. I have 3 examples of this, and I have some picture examples as well, but you will come across similar examples in practically every single culture or country everywhere. So I'm sure you will have some examples of this yourself. And then I thought we should have a look at how can we then embrace this in our interpretation work and our storytelling work at museums or heritage sites. As always, remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel and add your comments. I have 3 examples of fiction in historical context that I'd like to show you, and then I thought after we've had a look at these, let's dive into how we can embrace it in a historical context when we work in, for example, museums or historical buildings. The first example is that of legends or mythologies that somehow connected to a specific place, a historical place, an object, and sometimes also a building. Now, these are often quite old stories, so decades, centuries old sometimes, and that means layers of stories have been added and added and added, and sometimes even have been through modern twists in modern literature or modern interpretations like film or TV, for example. Now, an example of this, and you will have lots of these, especially I think connected with historical figures from other countries and from other cultures too. But I'm showing you one here from a very famous one from my native Denmark. It's about Holger the Dane at Kronborg Castle, where he is he's said to be resting now in the casemates in the cellars of Kronborg Castle. Now, this very famous legend goes all the way back to the Song of Roland, where we hear about him for the first time. Holger the Dane was a knight in Charlemagne's army, so we go all the way back to the early French legends. He was said to be fighting in the army, came back to Denmark, and it was actually a modern adaptation of the famous fairy tale storyteller Hans Christian Andersen, who put him in the casemates of Kronborg Castle, where he's said to be resting after many years of battle. But of course, as a true knight, he is sitting up, sleeping, because he has to be ready to jump to his feet and run back into battle the moment Denmark needs him. That's how the legend goes. And many people come to visit this very famous statue in the casemates. And this is an example of layered mythologies and legends twisted with modern interpretation that very much speaks to how stories were told in that day and age. And the castle, of course, has to connect this form of mythology to their modern interpretation and modern visitor connection and visitor interaction, at the same time as it has to embrace the layers that are also now very well known, like, for example, the famous Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale about Holger the Dane in the casemates. So that's an example of legends and mythologies connected to a historical place. Another example, and I'm actually returning to Kronborg Castle here, is about famous fictional characters, for example, from literature, because Kronborg Castle is also very famous for being Hamlet's castle. It's situated in the city of Elsinore in Denmark, and many people have heard of the famous Shakespeare story of the Prince of Denmark and the events that took place at the castle in Elsinore. And some visitors even get a little bit disappointed when they find out that Hamlet is indeed fictional. He never really lived. But of course, he's probably one of the most famous fictional characters in history ever, and not many people won't have heard of him. And of course, the castle has embraced this in their interpretation, their live interpretation as well, in Hamlet Live, an interactive event that takes place in the summertime where actors are living out scenes from Shakespeare's Hamlet story, and also interacting in character with visitors. And this is a way of keeping the literary story alive, of course, and adding it to the history of the castle as well. So playing out a fictional story, but in a historical setting. The final example I want to show you is that of modern TV, film, literature, also gaming adaptations that link to a historical place or perhaps a person or an object. Now I have a very famous example here from the Palace of Holyrood House in Edinburgh in Scotland, where we have actually a true historical event taking place in the famous murder of Mary, Queen of Scots' private secretary, David Rizzio, who was murdered in the Queen's private chamber at the palace in 1566. This is such a famous murder. You have a plaque there in the room where it took place, and even a blood stain on the floor if you go to visit. This is now a public room. It's one of their exhibition spaces. It has been shown in so many different films, TV series, talked about, described in so many different book adaptations as well, that when visitors come, it's almost like they have seen this murder happen. And they all come, of course, with different versions of the murder in their heads, depending on what they have seen. And even though this was a historical event, it was something that actually did take place. Visitors often come with so many fictional layers of this historical event that it's actually layers that very often the place has to take into consideration in their interpretation as well when they interpret this actually true historical event. So that was 3 examples of fiction or legends and mythologies in historical context or taking place in connection with historical places. So how can we embrace this in historical interpretation? Well, there are a few things to keep in mind here. First of all, embrace visitors' reason and motivation for coming to see you. Now, sometimes motivation is based on fiction or modern adaptation of historical events. However, whatever visitors have seen on TV or perhaps read in books has sparked a curiosity for learning more, for wanting to know more. So embrace that curiosity because it has led them to you. They are now here, either physically or they have chosen to somehow be part of your online offers or your offers somehow. So embrace the fact that there is a curiosity that has been sparked, even if it might be coming from a fictional or a modern adaptation of historical events. Now, this very much links to the second point, which is connect the historical facts with visitors' knowledge. Now, we all know that sometimes visitors come with a lot of knowledge. They might have read a lot or studied a lot. They might even be historians. We also know that some visitors don't come with any knowledge at all, really, or even with wrong assumptions. And sometimes visitors are wrong because of, for example, TV or book adaptations. So enlighten them in a positive way. Don't, of course, tell them that, oh, you're so wrong about this, even if they might be, but enlighten them about the historical facts in a positive way. So spark their curiosity even further. Invite them to explore the facts and historical sources that you have in your place. For example, through the historical remains, or invite them on your tours, if that's an offer you have, to see your exhibitions. Invite them to read specific sources. Guide them in the right direction here. So keep their curiosity alive. This probably leads to one of the most challenging points, which is keeping the balance in the storytelling between the myths, the added layers of story, and trust me, they can be many sometimes, the modern adaptations, and of course the historical facts. There is a lot of learning and knowledge that can be added and inspired in visitors via a curiosity that may have been sparked by fiction or modern adaptations of historical events. So embrace literature and mythology and everything in your storytelling, but of course match it with the historical facts that you hold in your historical place or in your historical remains, in your exhibitions or interpretation, or in your historical sources. And that's a wonderful balance, actually, because it means that you are embracing historical facts at the same time as you are embracing curiosity and the want to know more and learn more about history. Working with the many layers of fiction and added fictional stories and assumptions to historical facts and historical events can be really, really complex, but it's also something that's rather exciting from an interpretation perspective, because it deals with visitors' curiosities and their wish to want to know more and learn more. I did a video some time ago about authenticity in storytelling, and I'm going to link to that in the video in the description below, so do have a look at that one as well. But it tried to explain how we can create an authentic experience for visitors when our historic sources have gaps, because we tend to fill these gaps using our imagination, and there's nothing wrong with that as long as we are aware of them and we know when and how we're doing it. Let me know your experiences about these sometimes complex matters, and how you deal with fiction assumptions, sometimes wrong assumptions as well, coming from visitors, and the historical facts and sources that you are trying to interpret and convey. I'm pretty sure you will have lots of examples, so please do share.